developments in the White House Correspondents Dinner shooting case as the man accused of targeting President Trump remains in federal custody. Court filings now show Tomas Allen is off suicide watch while prosecutors signal more charges could be on the way. Joining us now to discuss all this and so much more is Jonathan Fahey, a former federal prosecutor and former acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Jonathan, good morning to you. We're learning that the suspect, we just found out this morning, no longer on suicide watch after his defense argued those conditions were too restrictive. From a legal standpoint, what does this tell you about where this case stands right now and where the defense could be taking this case?
Yeah, I found this really interesting, and I do think that the defense in this case is going to ultimately probably go down as try to make an insanity defense, right. Basically saying this defendant didn't know the wrongfulness of his actions, and so they're maybe setting the stage for that. And I also think the government is probably investigating the case, not just the facts of the case, but probably going out there and interviewing his friends and family members to sort of thwart that defense, to show that, hey, he was saying he did know what he was doing. And I don't think this will be an effective defense for him. However, I think it might be the goal of him is to not maybe get acquitted, meaning let go, but to have a lesser sentence. So if the focus becomes his mental health and other stuff, it might be used to sway the judge to give him a lesser sentence. Plus, there's nowhere else to go as the defense for this case. He comes running in, shooting a gun. It's not like he's going to say, oh, by the way, I was in Florida during this attack or something like that. So this is really the only way to go, and that's the way I think it'll break down.
Well, what way do you think that the prosecutor is going to go in this case? Just thinking of that, because, you know, of course, you have the grand jury involved, bringing possible additional charges. What additional charges could we be looking at? Remember, there was speculation there could be a charge for each person in the room. What do you think that the grand jury, what do you think we could come back with when it comes to these additional charges?
I think the additional charges, you know, on one hand, the government's goal is twofold, is to convict him and to get him the highest possible sentence, which is a life sentence. The other charges are going to be the assault and attempted murder of the federal agent who was shot, and I think they've now have ballistics proving that the bullets came from his gun versus like somebody else. So I think that's a charge that will definitely be brought, which carries with it a 10-year mandatory minimum, upwards of life. So I think that will be brought, and maybe some other ones. One thing, they probably don't want to overly complicate the case because they have basically a simple factual situation. So basically the goal is to get him off the streets in prison for up to life. I think that's what they're going to try to go for.
Of course, the other case everybody's talking about is one involving Comey right here. New developments in that case. You have the former FBI director, you know, with the DOJ saying that his indictment regarding the viral 8647. I want you to listen to this right here.
This is not just about a single Instagram post. This is about a body of evidence that the grand jury collected over the series of about 11 months. That evidence was presented to the grand jury. And it's not the government, it's not the Department of Justice, it's not Todd Blanche that returned an indictment against James Comey. It's a grand jury.
And you just heard the acting attorney general right there. So what do you think in terms of how important is that legal distinction? And what does it signal about the strength of the government's case right now?
Yeah, I found that pretty interesting because it does show that they're not just saying this whole case is there's a post online and that's the end of it. They probably, what they have to prove is that James Comey knew what it meant and intended to communicate a threat or had reckless disregard for that fact. I wouldn't be surprised if remember they interviewed him shortly thereafter, if they maybe went through that interview and compared it to other evidence they have, because if they could show he either didn't tell the truth in that interview, didn't tell the truth in some of these statements in the media, would show the inference would be, well, then he knew it was a threat versus, because remember James Comey's defense was he just happened to see these shells on the beach and he thought, wow, pretty crazy, I'll take a picture. But if he in fact knew what it meant, or maybe they have evidence that he was the one that arranged the shells or something like that. So those are the types of things I think they're looking at, and it'll be interesting because Todd Blanche did indicate there's more to it, which I would expect to be the case.
Well, you know, the knock on this case, of course, is that this case is primarily politically motivated, while the DOJ says it's about a broader pattern of threats against the president. How do you see this playing out in court? And what kind of evidence? You kind of touched on it right there, but that is what people are saying, that this is politically motivated.
Yeah, I think people will say it's politically motivated. I think the DOJ's response will be, we have a responsibility to investigate all threats against the president, and just because it happens to be a political adversary doesn't mean we should back away from it. But I think the type of evidence it will be, they'll probably maybe look through his emails, his other social media posts, interviewed him, interviewed other witnesses. One, to show he knew that this meant 8647 meant to be a threat to the president, to get rid of the president, and the inference would be a threat of violence. And they would go through it. He was promoting a book, so all of these things sort of come out to show, hey, he was seeking some attention, seeking to sort of raise his profile. But I think they have to take these threats seriously, particularly in light of the first story and the other two assassination attempts. You can't just threaten the president of the United States because you don't like him or any other reason. But I think, of course, James Comey will say it's politically motivated, but ultimately it'll come down to the facts. Did he know this was a threat, and was it objectively viewed as a threat by sort of a reasonable person, a reasonable jury?
All right, thank you so much. Former federal prosecutor and former acting director of ICE, Jonathan Fahey, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We have an update now on the shooting at the White House Correspondents Dinner. D.C.'s top prosecutor is sharing more about the shooting and confirming that the Secret Service agent who was shot during the attack was hit by gunfire from the suspect, Cole Allen.
We now can establish that a pellet that came from the buckshot from the defendant's Mossberg pump-action shotgun was intertwined with the fiber of the vest of the Secret Service officer. So is definitively his bullet. He hit at that Secret Service agent. He had every intention to kill him and anyone who got on his way to killing the President of the United States. This was a premeditated, violent act calculated to take down the president and anyone who was in the line of fire.
Well, Cole Allen is currently behind bars in D.C. and awaiting his next court date. Meantime, a federal judge is now raising concerns about how Cole Allen has been held as the case moves deeper into the court system. 7 News' John Gonzalez is live with the new developments. John, good morning.
Adriana, good morning to you. And this morning, this case is shifting focus a bit from the shooting that occurred inside the Washington Hilton in Northwest D.C. Over a week ago to now the conditions inside the D.C. jail and what's happening in the courtroom. A federal judge who is overseeing this case says he has, quote, grave concerns, unquote, about how Cole Allen has been held during the past week, including several days in solitary confinement, and has ordered a hearing with jail staff set for today at noon. This comes as Allen's attorneys say he is no longer on suicide status, easing some of their earlier legal concerns. Defense attorneys previously said Allen was held in a safe cell wearing a restrictive vest in a padded room with constant lighting, 24-hour lockdown, limited clothing, and restrictions on movement. They argued those conditions were overly harsh, calling them excessive and saying they made it harder for him to prepare for his defense. Now, the judge's order to hold this hearing today now signals a deeper look into those decisions, as Allen remains, of course, in federal custody, facing those 3 charges, including attempted assassination of the president. And you heard U.S. Attorney for D.C., Jeanine Pirro. She was very vocal over the weekend, saying that there is no question this morning that Allen shot the bullet that struck that Secret Service agent. We have more information on our homepage about this decision from the federal judge. Reporting live, John Gonzalez, 7 News.
More on the White House Correspondents Dinner shooting and other cases that we've been monitoring this week. Let's bring in former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, Nima Rahmani. It's great to see you. So many developments to talk about this week. Let's start with the White House Correspondents shooting. As I mentioned, the U.S. Secret Service director said this week that the agent was shot by suspect Cole Allen's shotgun at point-blank range. I imagine the interpretation of ballistics and what is happening in these surveillance videos will be central to this case. What do you expect on both sides?
Dee, thanks for having me. And yeah, what a week. And yeah, starting with Cole Allen, of course, I think it's an incredibly strong case. We've all seen the video, but it's really the shooter's own words, his manifesto sent to family members shortly before this attack. I mean, it's hard to get into the mind of a criminal, but in this particular case, certainly his own words will be used against him. And when Washington, D.C. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro goes to the grand jury and gets an indictment, I do expect to see additional charges, not just the attempted assassination of the president, but the assault on that Secret Service agent as well.
All right, well, we'll put a pin on that, monitor the situation there. Also, ChatGPT now linked to 2 criminal cases. The FSU shooting, which we discussed last week, and now the USF murder investigations happening. Authorities accusing the suspects of using ChatGPT to aid in the crimes. I understand that they're separate, but now that there are 2 criminal cases, Nima, with ChatGPT mentioned, does this make it easier for prosecutors to prove?
You know, I think this case is a little bit different from the FSU one in that it was after the fact, how to dispose of the body. Obviously, incredibly sad case there in USF. But I still think the Florida AG is going to have those same problems. For a criminal case, you need intent. Doesn't matter if it's Cole Allen or the USF killer who was roommates with one of the victims. Now, obviously, people are going to start using ChatGPT more, just like they previously used Google to commit crimes and to cover them up. The question is OpenAI and its agent acting intentionally? That's what you need for aiding and abetting or any other criminal case. Or is it just negligence, which of course is the basis for civil liability? I still don't think there's enough for a criminal prosecution, Dee, but obviously we're going to see more and more of these types of cases.
Right, both of them. And finally tonight, the historic and just wild New Orleans jailbreak. 10 inmates escaped. You'll remember there was a nationwide manhunt, and now the Orleans Parish Sheriff is indicted on charges of failing to prevent this from happening. Your thoughts?
Well, this case is a little bit different. So we talked about negligence, but apparently she was on notice, and really it was an embarrassment. When they escaped, they wrote too easy because it was that easy. So the fact that you have the sheriff here allegedly on notice that this escape was possible and failing to take action to do so, different type of case when it comes to intent. So we may have enough here for a criminal prosecution.
And then she, I know in her statements questioning the timing of it all. We'll see how that plays out. Former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, Nima Rahmani, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Dee. Talk real soon. Have a great weekend.
I'm National Correspondent Kayla Gaskins in Washington. The director of the Secret Service gave his first interview since the White House Correspondents Dinner shooting last weekend. Newly released surveillance video is now shedding light on the chaotic moments during Saturday night's shooting at the dinner. The newly released video is a longer version of the surveillance tape from the Washington Hilton Saturday evening, showing the moments before the suspect, Cole Allen, rushed past a security checkpoint. You see the alleged attacker walk through a doorway. A moment later, an officer and security dog approach the door, but then turn away, followed a second later by the suspect rushing through the door to the checkpoint and opening fire, hitting a Secret Service agent.
The suspect shot our officer point-blank range with a shotgun. Our officer heroically returned fire. It's great training. The officer just acted heroically.
In his first interview since the attack, Secret Service Director Sean Curran confirming only 2 people fired their weapons, the suspect and the Secret Service agent who'd been hit. Curran confirming the suspect was not hit by any bullets and was tackled to the ground 4 seconds after he rushed the checkpoint.
It appears that the suspect hit his knee while being engaged by the officer on one of our magnetometer boxes. At that moment is when officers and agents were able to subdue him and pile on top of him.
Even so, retired Secret Service agent Rich Staropoli argues that checkpoint needed to be more heavily guarded.
It's not a far reach to envision that if somebody gets past you, they're in the room with the president.
Meanwhile, President Trump heading out of town Friday for an event in Florida, the first time since the attempted assassination.
Do you feel safe going to something like this today?
I don't even think about it, Peter.
New questions being raised about whether additional security measures will be put in place.
Is there talks about you potentially wearing a bulletproof vest moving forward, given you have now been shot at?
I don't know if I can handle looking 20 pounds heavier.
The suspect's attorneys told a federal judge on Thursday they would not fight a motion for the suspect to remain behind bars as the case continues. He'll be back in court May 11th. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
Jarring new surveillance video shows the moments that a man barged through security at the White House Correspondents Dinner. Cole Allen was allegedly intent on killing the president and harming other members of the administration.
Allen is behind bars right now, and investigators are still combing through evidence of his cross-country journey. We do have team coverage tonight. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins heard from the director of the Secret Service about this incident.
But we're going to go first to our Rebecca Turco. She's live from the U.S. District Court. And Rebecca, Allen's staying in jail for now. What goes on next from here?
Yeah, next from here, he has a preliminary hearing in the coming weeks. And I spoke with a Homeland Security expert about all of this in addition to a lawyer. And that security expert says we really have to learn from all of this, that an accused would-be assassin shouldn't be able to get through so many layers of security before he's ultimately caught. Sharper surveillance video from the night of the shooting. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro says we're seeing Cole Allen shoot a Secret Service officer on his way to try to kill the president, that the officer was not hit by friendly fire. But Tanel Harvin, who used to head Homeland Security and Intelligence for the district, says
correlation does not equal causation. Right? Just because he has multiple guns.
On Monday, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche said they were still investigating ballistics. Meanwhile, prosecutors say this video shows the 31-year-old casing the area the night before. They say he accessed multiple articles online about the event's schedules and expected attendees in the days, hours, even minutes before.
This was someone with, by all accounts, no military training, no tactical training, putting together this wild scheme, and look how close he came.
Donnell thinks DOJ could consider what happened domestic terrorism. While that's not a federal charge, prosecutors can use it as a sentencing enhancement to try to tack on more time.
It helps make the underlying case stronger when you can attach that to it.
Former U.S. Attorney John Fishwick agrees, and he feels that's just the beginning.
I don't think they're just going to stop because they've got one case that's built against the president or against the Secret Service agents. They're going to build all the cases that are there so that they can send a clear and loud message that this is obviously not going to be tolerated. And whatever you do, however far your criminal activity goes, we're going to prosecute all of it.
And John Fishwick, who you just heard from, says setting precedent and creating this idea of deterrence for potential would-be copycats is certainly a big factor here. Scott?
Yeah, a big factor and a big concern. Rebecca, what's next for Allen from here?
Yeah, well, Allen has a preliminary hearing in about a week and a half, and that's kind of a bit like a mini trial. So we're expecting both sides to go through the evidence they've collected so far a bit more extensively. That is coming up on May 11th, and of course, we'll be covering that and bringing you the very latest. We are live from U.S. District Court. Rebecca Turco, 7 News.
I'm National Correspondent Kayla Gaskins on Capitol Hill. The Secret Service is under intense scrutiny after Saturday evening's assassination attempt of President Donald Trump at this year's White House Correspondents Dinner. Cole Allen, the man accused of opening fire outside the White House Correspondents' Dinner, back in federal court on Thursday.
This defendant was calculated, he was premeditated, he had every intention of killing the president and anyone who got in his way.
U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Jeanine Pirro, also confirming Thursday the Secret Service agent shot in Saturday's attack was not shot by friendly fire, as some speculated. The assassination attempt placing a spotlight, yet again, on the U.S. Secret Service and the agency's leadership. We spoke with retired Secret Service agent Rich Staropoli. What should have been done differently by the Secret Service in this instance?
First of all, I would have made the recommendation to the chief of staff that the president not go, given today's threat environment. The Secret Service seems to be stuck doing the same things that they've been doing for the last 40 years. They simply aren't keeping up with the times.
Secret Service Director Sean Curran was on Capitol Hill Wednesday briefing the full House Oversight Committee.
I think the buck always stops with whoever sits in the big chair.
And even though it's the third close call in less than 2 years,
There's always room for improvement, right? And he got into the building.
President Trump and the White House continuing to publicly praise the men and women of the agency.
They did a pretty good job, actually. You know, they stopped the NFL running back. I mean, he was like a running back. He was a speedy guy. I can only say that I know a lot of those people at Secret Service, and they were good and they were forceful.
Star Poli did say the president's personal detail deserves praise.
I think they did a fine job. They cannot continually be put in the situation where they've got to deploy to that point to remove the president.
But added he believes Secret Service Director Sean Curran should be more visible, assuring the public the agency is up to the task of keeping the president safe.
You never hear from the guy, you never see the guy. Elvis has been spotted more often than the director of the Secret Service.
Director Curran already met with the Senate Judiciary Committee behind closed doors. Top Democrat on the committee, Dick Durbin, said Curran told them he saw no indication of a security lapse on Saturday, reportedly insisting security measures functioned as they were meant to. On Capitol Hill, I'm Kayla Gaskins.